Imagine this. A family sits in their living room, clutching photographs of their loved one. The police file is closed, the evidence is cold, and the justice system has quietly moved on. But they haven't. They can't. Because somewhere out there, the person who shattered their lives is still free. And somehow, against every obstacle, against every locked door and every unanswered phone call, they decide to take matters into their own hands. This isn't just a crime story. This is the story of how families, ordinary people with no badge, no courtroom power, and no resources, stared into the abyss of injustice and refused to blink. The case that changed everything began on a quiet autumn evening. 24-year-old Sarah Mitchell left her college library around 9:15 p.m. She was supposed to head straight home, a 5-minute walk. She never arrived. Her mother, waiting by the window with dinner still warm, thought maybe she had stayed with a friend. But when morning came and Sarah's bed was still untouched, panic set in. A missing person report was filed immediately. The police, swamped with other cases, treated it as a routine disappearance. Maybe she ran off with a boyfriend. Maybe she needed space. But Sarah's parents knew better. Their daughter wasn't the type to vanish without a word. And then, 3 days later, their worst nightmare arrived. A jogger stumbled across Sarah's body in a wooded area just outside town. She had been brutally attacked. The Mitchells' lives shattered in an instant. Police worked the scene, collected fibers, took statements. But weeks passed, and nothing came. Leads went cold, suspects didn't pan out, and eventually, the case drifted to the dreaded category, unsolved. For Sarah's family, that word, unsolved, felt like a second death. But instead of collapsing under the weight of grief, they made a decision. If the system wouldn't fight for Sarah, they would. It started small. Her father began requesting police records through every channel he could. Her mother scoured the local area, knocking on doors, retracing Sarah's final steps, speaking to anyone who might have seen something. At first, neighbors thought it was just grief keeping them occupied. But then, strange details began to emerge. A gas station clerk remembered a nervous man loitering near the library the night Sarah disappeared. A bartender recalled serving someone covered in scratches days after the crime. Individually, these were scraps. Together, they were threads of a story. The Mitchells didn't stop there. They learned how to hire a private investigator, selling family heirlooms to pay for it. The PI uncovered something shocking: DNA evidence that had been collected but never fully processed by the lab due to backlogs and budget cuts. That evidence sat in storage, gathering dust. Furious, the family began a campaign. Letters to newspapers, interviews on local TV, social media posts pleading for the case to be re-examined. Slowly, pressure built. The police reopened the file. Months later, the DNA finally came back. It pointed to a man named Daniel Harris, a drifter with a history of assault who had left town shortly after Sarah's death. He had never been on the radar, but thanks to the family's relentless persistence, his name was finally in the file. Tracking him down wasn't easy. He had moved states, changed jobs, tried to disappear. But Sarah's family never gave up. They raised funds through community events, gathered signatures for petitions, and pushed law enforcement to act. When Harris was finally arrested, nearly 3 years after Sarah's death, the case went to trial. And this was no ordinary trial. The defense painted Harris as a victim of circumstance. The DNA, they claimed, could have been transferred, could have been explained away. The Mitchells sat through every grueling day, staring at the man who had stolen their daughter. And when the verdict finally came, guilty, the courtroom erupted in tears. Sarah's family had done the impossible. They had dragged justice out of the grave. But their story isn't alone. Across the country, countless families have carried this same torch. Like the Ramirez family, whose son Miguel was killed in a hit-and-run. Police had given up after months of dead ends. But his sister refused to let the trail grow cold. She began analyzing surveillance camera footage frame by frame, until she spotted a barely visible license plate number reflected in a store window. That single discovery cracked the case wide open, leading to the arrest of the driver who thought he had escaped. Or the Johnson family, whose teenage daughter was taken by a serial predator. For years, they pushed law enforcement to connect the dots between unsolved cases in neighboring counties. Their persistence finally forced agencies to share evidence, revealing a chilling pattern that no one department had pieced together. Their fight not only caught the man, but also prevented future victims from ever suffering his violence. Each of these stories is fueled by the same fire: grief turned into determination, love sharpened into justice. These families don't have forensic labs or badges. What they have is something far more dangerous to criminals: an unbreakable will. But what does it take for families to walk this path? Imagine waking up every morning, staring at an empty chair at the table, and knowing that the system has failed you. Imagine going to bed each night with a stack of newspaper clippings and police reports as your bedtime reading. It takes obsession, resilience, and a refusal to let your loved one become just another statistic. And sometimes the cost is devastating. Marriages strain under the pressure. Finances collapse as money pours into legal fees and investigators. Families become consumed by a single mission. But ask them if they regret it, and you'll hear the same answer: no. Because justice, even delayed justice, is worth everything. Sarah's case became a landmark in her town. Her family's fight inspired new legislation requiring all stored DNA evidence to be processed within strict timelines, preventing other cases from gathering dust. The Ramirez family's discovery became a textbook example for training officers in how to re-examine surveillance footage. The Johnson family's persistence changed the way law enforcement agencies share information across county lines. What started as grief-stricken households refusing to give up ended as movements that reshaped the justice system itself. And yet, for every success, there are still countless families waiting, begging, praying for answers that never come. Their stories remind us that justice isn't just a matter of courts and lawyers. It's often powered by ordinary people who refuse to accept silence. So the next time you hear about a cold case or an unsolved mystery, remember this: somewhere behind that story is a family sitting at a kitchen table piecing together the puzzle themselves. They may not wear uniforms, they may not carry badges, but they are the ones who keep the flame of justice alive when everyone else has turned away. And sometimes, against all odds, they win. Because justice, as these families prove, isn't always found in courtrooms. Sometimes it's carved out of sheer willpower, one sleepless night, one letter, one door knock at a time. And when it finally arrives, it isn't just a verdict, it's a promise. A promise that their loved one's voice, though silenced, was never forgotten.